coming to you live from undisclosed locations. We got our capstone to our Industry 4.0 series. I am Michael Askins, architect, technologist, and always with me is the professor, Chris. How you doing today, Chris?
Doing great. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, it's been quite a ride with this series. It's been a little protracted because we wanted to get some really some good experts in. We wanted to get some content. We wanted to get some good stuff going. So we started off with hey, let's have an episode about I 4.0, and then it turned into oh yeah, let's cover all the areas individually, and then we rolled Jeff Winter in, and then we got a special guest you brought along with us, Chris. Why don't you introduce the crowd, our guest?
Yeah, for sure. I'm super psyched that we've got Jesse Alleyne here with us today. So he's a colleague of mine at Microsoft. We've crossed paths a couple times over the last couple of years. He was an industry expert here within Microsoft, all related to manufacturing, and just a super smart guy and great to work with. So Jesse, why don't you tell us more about yourself?
Thanks, Chris. My name's Jesse Alleyne. As Chris mentioned, I work at Microsoft. I am a manufacturing industry director currently, but I spent the last roughly 10 years at Microsoft working on digital transformation for manufacturing as an advisor, both internally and externally. Prior to Microsoft, I worked at Honeywell in research and development and at FMC in our ground support and subsea robotics and research and development.
That's brilliant. Something we like to surprise our guests with. We never put in our show notes setting over, so I'm going to jump you here. You were not expecting this, but just to kind of get to know you. Last book you read?
Last book I read. So probably an audiobook about habits. I can't remember the full title, but basically about how to establish and new and good habits and get rid of bad habits.
James Clear.
Yes,
yeah,
got that one too. Yep, that's a great one.
Yes,
yeah, love it, love it.
Yeah.
So, Chris, speaking of books, how's the book going?
It's okay. We're still in three digits, but still steadily, selling copies every month. So it's going good. Doing actually a couple more speaking gigs coming up, where I've got the opportunity to kind of talk about some of those, some of those things that we cover within the book and really how to maximize, deploying AI within your environments.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Jesse, how about the last song on your playlist that you played?
Last song on my playlist. It's kind of so I'm into kind of just very slow music, especially when I'm traveling. So I think it's by a band called Men I Trust. Very esoteric band that I saw on one of my friend's Instagram feeds. It's good.
Nice.
Through the airport.
Yeah, it's really easy to get upset at the airport, so it's good to
Yeah, so selfishly, I ask these questions because I'm looking to add to my audiobook list and my playlist on my phone. So thank you for adding that there. So, one of the things we kind of asked you is to kind of take a retrospective of our shows, or at least the topics and some of the things we've been posting about Industry 4.0. What were your high level thoughts on the series that we had?
I thought it was very broad, which is great, and the level at which you approached it struck a really good balance between technology and change management. What I tend to see is folks tend to veer closer to one or the other based on their expertise, and it seems like you guys have a broad footing in both. So both the guests you've chosen and the approach you've taken, I think really kind of straddles
Awesome.
that gamut.
Thank you. Yeah,
Really,
we
well.
try to speak to business. We try to speak to technologists. We try to speak to other areas of the business that are affected. So that's good to hear that some of that came through. If there was one area or one show you thought of, like it left you wanting for more information, which one would that be? Would it be, the building factories or enabling the workers? Which area do you think is one that we should cover deeply?
I think enabling the workforce is the area that I'm spending the most time right now. Most of our customers and most of us as individuals are trying to figure out what our role will be going forward as technology advances. As we're seeing generative AI become more and more competent at more and more tasks, we're trying to figure out what the role of the human being should be. I'm thinking about I have a 3-year-old daughter. What should she study in college? Those kinds of things. So kind of that's where I'm spending my time, is to figure out what the role of technology will be. What the skill sets we should develop are, um, and what the next 5 years looks like for someone that's kind of more senior as
Yeah,
they're
for
guiding
sure. So
organizations.
this touching on that, and I know this wasn't something that we kind of wanted to touch on, but you just fired a synapse in my head. So my daughter is a graphic artist, UI UX expert, and also works with websites and applications that require. We want to make sure that there's democratization for all, especially those with disabilities and stuff like that. One of the things she keeps mentioning is that when she sees posts, she can tell immediately if it's done by Gen AI. And sometimes I'll reach out to those individuals and say, "Hey, did you have Chat GPT or did you have Bing write that for you?" And a lot of the times, 99% of the time, she's right. And being in the artist world, I guess she kind of takes a little bit of a kind of a standoff stance to it, just because it's taking away from the creative soul that she pours into creating art and graphics and stuff like that. Now, if you were to put your way forward hat on, and even Chris, if you want to chip in on this too, if you were to put your way forward hat on there, is there a place for the creative with these kind of tools? Coming off the statement that you made of like, hey, what kind of skill sets do you need to excel in business? What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Jesse, I'll let you go first.
Sure. So that's exactly where my mind has gone, and with each of these transformations. So as I mentioned, I've been working on kind of AI in manufacturing for the last 10 years, and I always like to pull from the past, because the only thing that doesn't
Yep.
change is kind of human nature. So understanding how humans have adapted to change in Industry 3.0 and 2.0, and how long those things have taken to get implemented. And I think one of the examples that I thought was interesting is, when the nail gun was invented, it didn't replace the carpenter, it replaced the guy that didn't know how to use the nail gun, right? So I kind of see the tools in the same way. We have to get comfortable, or the people that will be successful, probably to a larger extent going forward, are the ones that know how to use those tools and know how to understand where those tools should be used, and what the risks are and what the faults are with those tools going forward. So I think, as you mentioned, a creative going forward that knows how to use these tools well will be just massively more productive than they have been in the past. And there will still be opportunities for them to be creative. It's just going to be different going forward. That's at least how I see it at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And the word that comes to mind for me is precision. And when, for anybody who's used any of the graphics development tools, ChatGPT or any of those that you can create your own graphics by text, um, it's okay, right? I've been playing around with cartoonizing myself, right, in images of myself, and I, it's not me, right? It looks really really different than me. It's not super accurate. And if I wanted that super accurate rendering, I would have to hire somebody to do that work. Now there's also that balance of what's good enough versus what is necessary. And when you think about social media posts, they're all consumed so quickly that within the next couple of years we're going to see that process basically automated, because we're all just scrolling very very fast through all of these posts, just kind of reading it quick. We're not scrutinizing punctuation or worried about the structure of a sentence or things like that. However, when you talk about writing a thesis or a published document or a book and things like that, it takes a lot more care and feeding. And I look at some of those AI tools as the ability to help us augment what we're doing to a certain extent. I generally call it the 70 to 80%, but it's really more about sort of inspiring how to get started and then applying your own sort of message to what you've already started. So I don't think Sophia has anything to worry about.
She doesn't. Yeah, because I did an experiment on our channel started growing because we have 18K ish audio listeners, but the video side here we're just getting fresh. We're just starting the video side, and I did an experiment with one of my vid tools that automatically creates a thumbnail versus one that we have for the Industry 4.0 where we have the common background and feel. And one of my media analysis told me that there's a reason why we get really good, like especially the one, Chris, that you and I did last, did really good, was because it was recognizable. So somebody like you were mentioning, people scrolling through, all of a sudden they see our heads with that Industry 4.0 background, they jam on the brakes and they push the button, you know.
Sure.
So it's probably a merge between the both. Well, this little bit has not much to do exactly with the series here, but it does have to do with the mindset on how we use different tools and different things and how we think differently around business. One of the things that came out in every episode was some form of having a conversation around innovation. So, Chris, you want to take the innovation line?
Yeah, I mean, innovation is not invention, right? And they can't really be choosed interchangeably because they're totally separate topics, even though they are related.
Yeah. So, Jesse, in your experience, your vast experience seeing industry, seeing different businesses and transformation, from an innovation perspective, why do so many organizations tend to get innovation wrong? What are you seeing in that space?
So it's a question and situation I hold near and dear to my own heart, coming from R&D. Um, it- I think that the incentives, it always goes back to incentives, right? So risk taking within an organization, how is failure viewed within an organization? There's the Edison quote where he says, "I didn't fail at inventing the light bulb 100 times. I figured out 100 ways that don't work." Right. And within an organization, it's kind of viewed as failure versus figuring out what doesn't work. And it kind of starts from there, right? People tend to uh, do things that are more iterative than game changing. They tend to shy away from risk when it comes to new designs, new products, etc. And at the end of the day, most people don't get fired for doing the same thing. They
Mm.
get fired for doing something different wrong, right? And so it all kind of goes back to that point, because as you go to production, you get into tooling, you get into sales, etc. Innovation is very, very difficult. I can talk about it personally on our from our partner ecosystem perspective, right? We have a lot of our partners that we're trying to innovate within the context of infusing AI into their solution set. And the product group was on
Mm.
board, but their salespeople didn't understand what the new value proposition would be. So they tended to sell the old products, right? So there are all of these additional challenges that come along with innovation. Even if you're successful at stage one, you might not be at stage two, and it might be out of your control at stage two, et cetera. So there's a lot of kind of landmines to be hit when it comes to innovating
Yeah, I
successfully.
think Jesse, the line you used, about how the hammer wasn't replaced, especially with the folks that didn't know how to use the hammer properly, right? And when we look at the history of innovation and we look at the history of adoption of innovation, it's still holding true. With the customers that I work with very closely, there's still a contingent of them who are not embracing all of these, excellent AI tools that are adding to productivity gains and cost reductions and those types of things. And it could be a matter of, fear of the unknown, fear of making a bad decision or being directed in the wrong way. Um, you know, just an organization having other priorities where something like AI could be a make or break. Edison was a single man that was able to iterate 100 times on the light bulb because he didn't have to worry about shareholders or business owners or stakeholders that had millions and billions of dollars invested in these things. And so it becomes a big gamble for some of these organizations to be able to make massive change rapidly, because they just don't know which way they're going to go. But at the same time, you have the opposite where, business as usual, it was always done this way. So we're going to continue to do it this way. And that keeps me safe. Right. And I think we're starting to see with all the concerns around AI taking jobs and, that our competitors are, from an industry standpoint, are embracing some of this technology and really, really maximizing the value from it. It's starting to change some minds in that way, and folks who can't keep up are going to go the way of the dodo.
One of the things that I've seen in the customers that I deal with, and I want to see if you guys see this too, is commitment, right? So some organizations will say, yes, we want to be innovative and we're going to do this, but they only go knee deep in the water and they don't put the right amount of resources in and or the willing to fail because of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So they're going to be like, we need to be on the edge here. So we're going to only give 10% of effort towards this. And if it works out, great for us. And it's a minimal loss. I'm seeing that a lot. Are you guys seeing that too as well?
Yeah, very much.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Sorry, go
Absolutely.
ahead.
Yeah. So I think to your point, companies underestimate the difficulty, right, of being innovative, right? So we can talk about, the phones in our pocket. They came out and they've stayed relatively similar for the last 15 years. Um, but talking about manufacturing specifically, I had a customer that was in the field service business, and they infused AI into their product and wanted to sell it at an upcharge, but it was a net benefit to their customers because of all the things that were integrated into the platform. And their expectation was, we're going to design it, we're going to train our salespeople, and we're going to sell it, right? And they brought Microsoft in because their customers were not buying. And what we discovered was, with the change to kind of a usage based model, their customer base was fundamentally different. The person that they should be talking to within that organization was no longer responsible for the metrics that the new product would be driving, right? So they had historically an IT product owner on the customer side. But when you're talking about uptime and service models, their salespeople didn't have the relationships within those customers to talk to the head of service to talk about how AI is going to help them with reducing the number of changeovers. Their IT counterpart that they historically had dealt with just said, "This
Yeah.
is a 30% upcharge. I don't have budget for this." Right. So, they were ready to cut the product because they're saying it's not selling. We've invested. We've got to move on. Whereas the transformation actually was going to take longer
Yeah.
than they expected.
Unknown and unseen, right? That just throws orgs for a loop. Kind of pivoting off to another area. So if you were to say pull from, and you might have covered this already, but if you were to pull from, two points that would be the top takeaways of this series so far, and point, say, a listener who's just picking up this and say they have limited time, which episodes you covered, hey, enable the worker, but what are the two takeaways that you got from this? Is there anything that I'm going to kind of couple this together, like Jeff Winter, his episode, there was tons of takeaways for me because the man just opens up his skull and fact in history. It just oozes all over the place. And you're in a wealth of learning, right? So is there a stat that surprised you, or is there a top takeaway that came out of listening to the series?
I would say the biggest takeaway that I had was kind of more broad than just a fact. It's just the overall size and scale and implications of
Yeah.
this transformation. So we've been talking about Industry 4.0 again for at least 10 years, if not 15. But kind of the forward-looking view and a lot of the stats that Jeff mentioned on the size and the opportunity of getting Industry 4.0 right, and I think we're a lot closer than we ever have been.
Yeah,
Was really
for
interesting
sure,
to
for
me.
sure. So you had mentioned, and wholeheartedly agree with you, is that it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of time, it takes commitment. There's things behind innovation and getting things to where we want to call Industry 4.0. But there's a lot of product associated, especially on the Microsoft side. Are there things that maybe an organization that's just getting started should like kind of look at from a product perspective to help them with their journey, whether it be help enabling innovation, whether it be helping, like digital twins in a factory, that's a little bit more than just dipping your toes in. But is there a particular product or Microsoft's product space that they should start with?
Chris, do you want to? I have lots of thoughts here, but
Yeah,
Chris,
I
do you want
mean,
to say anything on
we
that?
covered a lot, with Jeff when it comes to process, right, and how to better handle uh, the ins and outs of a daily, production run, if you will, or manufacturing cycles, and really it starts with making sure that we're optimizing those processes. Now, they can be hand in hand where you implement the technology while also doing the process improvement. But those are hard because, people process technology, the people in the process are the hardest part always. And, you know, getting that change and the support behind that change from the top down can be really really challenging. And so I say it a lot, the snowball effect, where you start slow. You work with some pilots, some POCs, where you feel based on your own research, your own strategies, will make the biggest impact. Where you start to see that effect on the bottom line, or customer satisfaction or employee satisfaction, in those types of areas. You start there to gain that momentum and then receive more budget, more funding for items like that. So I start with process because I think that is usually the biggest challenge folks have.
Yep, and I think our time at Microsoft is reflecting in our response. But my my thought, kind of philosophical at first, practical second, is the biggest, best export from Microsoft is probably Satya's book, Hit Refresh, and the growth mindset in general. Most of our customers, when they're looking at technology, or are, as Chris mentioned, kind of saying, what should we buy in order to leapfrog? And it's the first question I have is, how well are you using what you have? And do you have a culture to jump in and learn about new things, right? Without that as kind of a foundation, throwing additional technology at your workforce, especially if the risk and incentives aren't aligned, is not really a winning strategy. Once you get that kind of baseline established of, if we, let's dig in. I might be an expert in my domain, but I'm not an expert in technology, and I can run over and ask the intern, how do you do this cool new thing, even though I've been in the industry for 40 years, right? Once you have that kind of learning mindset, that sets the foundation to start using some of these tools. From a actual product perspective, I think the co-pilots are really interesting because they
Yes.
minimize the change management of getting the benefits out of Gen AI. They use the data that you've had, they kind of overlay the processes that we're all comfortable with. So, in any domain, so if you start on the productivity side, or if you're talking about ERP, or the co-pilots are kind of the easiest way to ingest and get a lot of value out of Gen AI today.
I think you are a hidden host because that was the perfect segue to my next topic, AI and co-pilots. Thank you, sir. So it's, those who are longtime listeners of the show know I grew up in the data center. I adopted cloud early. I'm a big security guy, right? Information architecture and security, all of that tied together is a much needed skill set. And I am also an early adopter of Copilot, and I have written Copilots for both clients and for my own use. I'm using the M365 Copilot, and it is so transformative to my way of working that my team looks at me and they're so annoyed when I just immediately after a meeting am able to go to Teams and say, "Oh, here's the action items. Let's get working." Like a more efficient, more nimble, more capability. But when we look at it from an industry perspective, I started using Copilot to do some analysis on our customer type and what we're doing from the day job perspective. Um, I'm using Copilot to try to figure out how to grow the audience. There's various things and tools that normally you'd sit there and have to think it out, but using natural language processing and using these tools, you're able to, get answers or at least a direction. Because there's always that big asterisk, verify, right? You got to verify everything. But I'll say that it's amazing and transformative when it comes to what I am doing from my day to day, let alone thinking about what it could do for industry. So, do you guys have some customers that have written any co-pilots? If so, is there any like success stories around this in industry that you can think of? I know I have a couple in the plastics world and in the steel world. What are your experiences with it this early on?
I don't have any co-pilot success stories just yet,
Oh,
right? I
okay.
have I have OpenAI success stories, where you think of like the RFP process or the NDA slash MSA process for looking at those documents and um, uh, basically mirroring what was done in the past and highlighting areas that So if I've got an NDA that has red lines in many other documents, and I get the NDA from a partner, and it's got similar language, I can automatically highlight those, saving our team of lawyers a ton of time and having to review those documents, and some of them can be 30 pages and stuff. So a lot of success stories around that type of thing. But with Copilot Studio being on the newer side, and the space evolving so quickly, just don't have any of the other ones captured quite yet.
Yeah. Jesse, do you have any spots?
Yeah, yeah. So I can't share too much because our customer kind of views it as their secret sauce going
That's
forward, which is
brilliant.
which is fantastic. Um, but kind of generically speaking, they have very complex products, and they have a deep catalog of these very complex products. And what they've done is they have ingested all of the manuals, all of the data, all of the service history of these products into a co-pilot that their sales and service people can now just ping and ask in natural language, for model XYZ, uh, how do you change this part? And it'll pull it up naturally in real time in front of the client. So it really helps them to be much more consultative, and much more informed. If imagine going into a client and they say, "This product that you manufactured 30 years ago, we're having this problem." You typically have to say, "Okay, I'll take that as an action item, and I'll kind of search for the domain expert within our organization, and hopefully they hopefully I can capture your question accurately to relay it to them, and they don't have any follow-ups that I don't have to come back to you to, right? So you have this long loop that starts versus,
Yeah.
okay, what's your question exactly? Let me type it in. Here's the answer, right? So
That's
it's
brilliant.
incredible
That's
for them.
definitely brilliant. We are in the age of AI. Co-pilots are, we mentioned earlier about the graphic artist in the family. She actually created her own co-pilot and co-pilot studio. So there's a co-pilot for everyone, and she's not the technical. Like I'm the nerd that does the zeros and ones, and she's the one that does the creative stuff in the world. But it's definitely, it definitely democratizes being able to use AI, because AI of old used to be all, coding out stuff. Right now, you can just use that natural language, large language models. You can tap into those, right? And it just makes such a great effort to get off the ground. So I asked earlier, what are some of the things that help organizations kick off? I totally glazed over it. I should have said Copilot was my choice on what organizations should be doing. In Microsoft lowered the threshold from a cost barrier to get all organizations in, and people are still shocked by that. They still think there's this 300 user barrier there just to get on, Copilot. And when you have the M365 Copilot, and then you look at what you can do in Copilot Studio. Here's my big product plug for the day. If you have that license, there's a thing out there called Copilot Notebook, which allows you to iterate on screen real time and change your language around, so you're not copying and pasting prompts and becoming really mired down in the process. And you can fully flesh out, what you're looking for in the notebook, and you can, as well as you can in Studio. So that's my tip for the users today to go check out. Kind of summarizing things with what we've talked about today. And Jesse, for you first, and then Chris follow up, because I think you know where I'm going with some of this. If there was a industry specific podcast, I know there are a couple out there, but we had, say, a bi-weekly show on industry, what would the topics, what do you think, being wired into the customers, what would they want to hear of regularly? I'm sure they wouldn't want to hear every week me saying, hey, go use Copilot Notebook. But what kind of topics, what do you think that they want to hear, the audience in this space?
The feedback that I'm getting from customers is I want to hear from other customers. I want to hear how they got to where they are, how they overcame certain barriers. Doesn't necessarily have to be a competitor, but understanding, from our view, of course, as industry folks, the use case drives everything. So if there's a use case that they're interested in, they want to hear how did you get from point A to point B to get this use case into production from other customers. So that is one thing I would say. You're probably not going to invite me back because you're going to start putting customers on your call. But, but that's
Oh,
one thing
oh,
I
oh,
would
you're
say
coming
that
back if
that
you
I
want to
get
be here,
feedback
sir.
on a
You're
lot.
brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's the first thing that came to mind is how are these tools being used? Where are they making an impact? Where are we seeing maximum ROI and minimum TCO? And being able to mirror those use cases, right? So, one of the challenges that I have frequently is finding user stories for our customer base. And so, any customer that's willing to talk to another is really worth its weight in gold.
Yeah, I agree. One of the challenges I have with getting customers on the show, and I've done this going all the way back just when we were just a pure audio show. A lot of them say we can't be on because we're not, like, in their employment contract, they're not allowed to go on social media or onto shows like this and disclose anything. The fear of, oh, you're going to let the secret sauce out, or we're going to, have a. We had a near incident once when this was years ago, where we had someone actually distill their security posture and the tools and how they configured it, and we're on the screen because we did video for queuing, but it was just pure audio. We're like, no, stop. So we had to do a massive like edit of that and to make it not disjointed. So if there are any customers that are willing to speak at a high level on maybe just the process and the mindset, as Jesse mentioned, feel free to come on board. I put an all call out to some Reddit boards as well as on LinkedIn groups to say, hey, what do you want to hear? And are you willing to come on and talk? So there has been some feedback. There's also, from an appetite perspective, I put a survey out across the Reddit forums as well as one, oddly enough, a Facebook group on industry, which is really kind of stale, but I found it. So I asked. 1,722 people said, I would tune in regularly to hear about this. And the other thing was depending on the topic. So I think that what you messaged, Jesse and Chris, your experiences of, getting the journey down is just as important. So I think we're about at time. Is there any final thoughts you want to add to this topic and or what we've covered in the series, Jesse?
The only other kind of point that I found that was very interesting on this Gen AI topic was, I typed into uh, Bing Copilot this morning, what's the total value add of Gen AI globally going forward? And it brought up a McKinsey article that said 2.6 to $4.4 trillion annually. And I was like, okay, so what does that mean as far as a country? Like what size country is that? And so the third largest and below economies are about $4 trillion. So Japan, Germany, India, that's the net value add that they see with these tools going forward. So I thought that was super interesting. So I wanted to share that with folks. But just wanted to say thank you for having me on. It's really great to chat with you guys about this topic.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on. When we get a mind share of experts and those who are seasoned in the area, we really appreciate your time. Chris, you know what I have to say right now? I have to say that the show's for information and entertainment purposes only. Consult a professional before deploying anything. If some things may look like it might work in your environment, all environments are not equal. One size does not fit all. So the things we've talked about today, though they're conceptual, make sure that you speak with a professional, or if you have a Microsoft rep, reach out to them about some of these tools that we've kind of mentioned too. We always thank the listeners and the viewers now. I used to say and or viewers, but it is viewers now. We'd like to thank you all for subscribing and watching. We've had a growth spurt here on the heels of our last two shows, and we'll hope that this goes further. Chris, any final words?
No, Jesse, thank you again. This has been awesome. Really appreciate your insight. And looking forward to doing something again in the future.
Alrighty, everyone. Thank you. We'll see you on the next
Sure.
go around. And the crew here, if we can just hang back, we'll talk to you all in a moment.